Hi, welcome to Van Slam's Vespa Garage. Today we'll be replacing the rear tire on my Vespa LX150. I will be going over step-by-step instructions, so enjoy. And yes, I'm Van Slam on modernvespa.com. So, let's go over the tools that we'll be using. We will be going over the tools from left to right. We will be using a hammer, a needle nose plier, a 1/2-inch socket wrench with a 24mm socket, 6mm Allen wrench with a 6mm socket, flathead screwdriver, 3/8-inch socket drive with a 6-inch extension, with a swivel knuckle, the downsize conversion to a 1/4 drive, and a 10mm socket, and a tube of anti-seize grease. Okay, let's look at the Vespa and see what we have to do. The tire and the rim are blocked by the exhaust. The exhaust must come off before we can do anything further. The exhaust is held on by 2 Allen head bolts, as you can see here, and the exhaust is held on to the engine by 2 brass nuts. Here are the brass nuts that hold the flange and exhaust to the engine. First, loosen the nuts and the bolts before we remove any of them. Start off by loosening the left brass nut using the 3/8-inch ratchet with the extension, the knuckle, and the 10mm socket. Sorry if the picture's blurry. Now move on to loosen the right brass nut of the exhaust. Once these nuts are loosened, we move on to the Allen bolts which hold the muffler to the frame. I start by loosening the bottom Allen bolt, then move on to loosen the upper Allen bolt. Once everything is loose, I go back under the Vespa, removing the left, then the right brass nut. I then remove the lower Allen bolt. Finally, I remove the upper Allen bolt. By removing the bolt, I support the unit with my other hand. I then jiggle the muffler unit to get it free. And here is the freed muffler with the Allen bolts and corresponding brass nuts put over to the side. Now that the muffler is off, you can clearly see the tire and the rim and what holds the rim to the rest of the bike. Once you're done admiring the rim and the tire, let's focus on the center. First thing we'll want to do is take the cotter pin out. We will need to bend straight the ends opposite the loop. For this we will use the needle nose pliers. Once this is done, we'll need to extract the cotter pin. In order to do this, grab the loop end of the cotter pin with your needle nose pliers. While squeezing your needle nose pliers, hit the needle nose pliers with your hammer lightly and the cotter pin will slide out. Next we'll use our screwdriver to remove the keycap. We are now in the home stretch. We now use our 1/2-inch ratchet with our 24mm socket to take the axle nut off the spindle. This is held on very tight, so you may want to use a breaker bar. At this point, this task became a 2-person job. I took the scooter off its center stand. I had someone hold the Vespa up while holding the back brake, and then proceeded to loosen the nut. I took the nut and the washer behind it off. I put the scooter back on its center stand and tried to take the rim off. No luck, it didn't budge. I took my hammer and solidly hit the spindle. I did this about 20 times and the rim came off, and there was no damage to the spindle, as you can see. I then took out the washer that sits between the spindle base and the rim. I then examined the spindle and the brakes to make sure everything was okay. And now here is a picture of my old Pirelli and rim and my new replacement tire, the Continental Zippy 1. I am replacing the Pirelli with the Continental because of all the great raves of reviews I've heard, or rather read, on modernvespa.com from all my fellow riders. The Continental lasts longer, offers a better ride, and better traction. Here is my new Continental Zippy 1 mounted on my Vespa rim. I had this done at a neighborhood shop and it took all of 10 minutes. As you can see, the yellow circle is placed near the valve. This is for balancing purposes. There are two directional arrows on the tire sidewall. Make sure you use the right arrow because these are directional tires. One arrow shows the direction if you use the front tire. The other arrow shows the direction if you use the back tire. Okay, now it's time to get the tire and rim back on. Now I put the washer between the spindle base and the rim back on. Now I also apply some anti-seize grease to the spindle. Be sure not to get this on the brake pad or the drum. Now gently place the rim and the tire on the axle spindle. Check to see if you can see some threads from the spindle. If you can't see the threads, you may want to use a hammer to bang the rim on. Place a piece of wood on top of the rim so you don't damage the finish. If so, use the nut to push the rim back on until you have enough room for the other spacer. Once you have enough room, take the nut off. Now place the washer on the spindle. Place some anti-seize grease on the spindle thread and then place the nut on the spindle. Now tighten the nut on the spindle. You will be using your 1/2-inch ratchet with your 24mm socket. Tighten this nut to 80 to 90 foot-pounds. That is really tight. Replace your cotter pin cap key on the spindle. Be sure to align the cap gaps with the cotter pin holes in the spindle. The cotter pin cap key may not fit on the spindle. You may have to tap your cap key with your hammer and screwdriver to secure it and make it fit right. Replace your old cotter pin with a new cotter pin. Slide the cotter pin through the cap key guides and the spindle hole. You may have to tap the loop end of the cotter pin to get it through. Now bend the open ends opposite the loop end back towards the loop end with your needle nose pliers. Great, now the rim and tire are back on the scooter. All we've got to do now is put the exhaust on. First, let's put some anti-seize lubricant on the Allen bolts. Next, we'll place some anti-seize lubricant on the brass exhaust nuts. Here is the exhaust port that the muffler will attach to with its flange and brass nuts. You will need to shimmy the muffler back in place. Once the muffler is in place, use the Allen bolts to secure it and take on the weight to the frame. Do not fully tighten the Allen bolts yet. Place the exhaust bolts through the flange and tighten the brass nuts to the exhaust bolts. Now alternate the tightening of these nuts. Now these nuts should be tightened to 11 to 13 foot-pounds of torque. Once this is completed, you can now finish tightening the Allen bolts which hold the muffler to the frame. Now you are done. You can sit back, relax, and admire your work. Or do what I did. Start up the Vespa, go for a ride, and listen to it purr. After a quick ride, I noticed that the Vespa handled better. The ride seemed to be more comfortable, and the Vespa seemed more stable. Well, that's a wrap. I hope this video is helpful to you. Special thanks to Jess for setting up a kick-butt website for the Modern Vespa community. And I also want to thank all the members of Modern Vespa who share all the information that they have out there. So be safe and keep on scootering.